Good evening, members and officers and members of the public who are joining us on the live stream. This is the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, rescheduled from the end of August as a result of there being a by-election. My name is Kate Salmon and I am the chair of the board. I'd also like to particularly welcome councillors Canavan and Wright, who are joining us for the first time as members of the board, following various changes that have come about. And firstly, I will ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out the housekeeping notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the car park at the front of the building. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we'll move on to apologies, and I'll ask the clerk if there are any apologies for this meeting, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies for this meeting from Councillors McCrow and Waite, and we have Councillor Aikenhead, the Vice Chair, who's joining us online this evening.
Thank you.
Sorry, we have Councillor Tarling substituting for Councillor McCrow.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Tarling substituting. Thank you. Then moving on then to declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests to declare on any items on the agenda, please? Not seeing any indication. If anything does occur to you as we go through the agenda, please do speak up. So we'll move on then to item 4, which is confirmation of the minutes of the previous board meeting. Can I seek consensus that these reflect an accurate record of the last meeting? And no dissent? Okay, then those are confirmed. Thank you very much. Moving on then to public issues. I don't believe we have any public petitions, questions or statements received. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's dealt with that. And then moving swiftly on to item 6, which is our first report. It is the commercial operations report. We have Councillor Rich Herritt here to, I believe, to present. And then we also, oh, you look like I might not be right about that. We also have Amanda Barry here and a number of heads from across the service who may, forgive me, have to, some of you introduce yourselves to me to remind me of your name before you start, if that's okay. But I believe I'm handing over to Councillor Herritt to begin with. Thank you. Okay, we just have a technical hitch. I think, are you back online now, Councillor Herritt?
It's rare. It looks like it should be working.
Okay, we're just bearing with the technology for a moment. For anybody following us online. Councillor Herritt's microphone's not working.
Can I check that this is working? Excellent. So I'll start again. So to be clear, I'm going to do a little bit of a introduction before a presentation, and then invite questions. We're going to try and keep it fairly brief, so there's more time for questions. So I'll start. So obviously you'll have all read the report, and hopefully it will have all made sense. It's important to note that the commercial services team deliver a surplus back into the council's core budget, and that enables key services to continue. It does allow investment to be made in these commercial areas and also provide some of the things that people most like about living in the area. We have Highcliffe Castle, Upton Country Park and the Seafront as key examples of that, leisure with public health benefits. The events team obviously run events like Arts by the Sea and also enable dozens and dozens of community events and provide advice to people looking to do so. Obviously, the teams would all like to be able to retain more of their budget and make more investment in their service areas, but that does have to be balanced against our need for funding services. There have been some standouts in recent years, Highcliffe and Upton both completing heritage-funded projects, and several of our historically loss-making areas of operation like Queen's Park and leisure centres heading towards a position where they're going to be operating at cost-neutral position going forwards. Obviously, this is difficult. Council facilities cannot operate like those in commercial. Commercial services were excluded from the government's promise last year to cover the impact to local authorities on the NICS increases. And along with all the other cost pressures affecting local businesses, like energy and cost of products and obviously cost of services in general to buy in, that puts us in an increasingly difficult position. Teams are still doing that, but increasing fees and prices against costs rising or more quickly than inflation means this is a challenge. A lot of these teams are also out on the front line representing the council in kiosks, parking, seafront rangers, visitor services, and other council employees. A lot of our residents do see the most. So I'm going to hand over to Amanda, who's going to take you through some slides and a whistle-stop tour of what they do.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harriott. And thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I don't actually have any slides, so sorry if I've disappointed you. But I did just want to, without going through the report in detail, just draw upon a few key items from the report. So commercial operations consist of 5 key service areas. So we have seafront, leisure and events, the flood and coastal erosion risk management team, car parking, and also commercial operations. Overall, we have 438 permanent and fixed term staff and over 500 casual members of staff. But we're also strongly supported by a volunteer base, particularly within our heritage venues. And all of those staff together help contribute over 23 million as a net income position to the council. The report that has been prepared for this meeting covers just a small selection of what we do at quite a high level. And I'm very conscious that you might have a number of questions and some of which we might not be able to answer for you this evening, but we will do our utmost to be able to do so. But if we can't, we'll come back to you with responses. And I do have each of the heads of service here this evening who will hopefully be able to help answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yet you've reminded me to say that this was, to clarify, that this was a piece of scrutiny that was requested a little while ago as a sort of an overview for information for the board around the work within commercial operations. But as Amanda's just touched on, is clearly there's a lot going on within that department, and this therefore has to be quite a high level report. And I think it would be quite good as a board if we saw this as potentially a bit of a jumping off point to identify maybe areas if we're interested in looking into particular areas in more detail, because I doubt that, as you've alluded to, that we'll be able to cover very detailed questions about any particular service tonight. But perhaps if there's an area that turns out to being of particular interest, we could commission a further report to the board. Out of today. That was how I was thinking we might treat this tonight. Is there any further presentation, or can I move to? Okay, in which case I'm going to open up to the board members to ask any questions that they might have. Anybody? Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much indeed for the report. I'm just curious about the list of key initiatives and projects that are outlined paragraph 19. So a couple of questions on that, if I may. There is reference to the beach huts and the refurbishment and replacement programme, and I may have dreamt it, but I thought I'd read some time ago that there was a possibility that the council might be seeking to sell the lodges which are in Boscombe. So I wonder if you might be able to clarify what the situation on that is. And also my second question is around cliff stabilisation. I have raised this a couple of times separately with officers because of the situation on the East Cliff, and I understand it's a significant piece of work and a lot of thought is being given to it. But again, it would be really helpful to understand exactly where we are with that programme, not necessarily this minute, but at some point to have a more detailed explanation of what it is we're looking at, what it is we're planning to do, and if there is any timescale around that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm right in saying that Anthony and Matt might be the two people to be. There are a couple more spaces here if you don't want to have to get up, Helen. Sorry. Feel free to more people to come up to the table if you wish. May I hand over to you?
Yeah, I'll start off. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. I'm Anthony Rogers. I'm the head of the Seafront Service. Thank you, Councillor, for your questions. In terms of the maintenance of huts, there are various programmes related to the maintenance of huts. Firstly, from our core budget, the Seafront Service has a maintenance budget that is aligned to try to keep the huts up to a reasonable standard. Clearly a commercially important asset for us, and it's right that we invest as much as we can in them. But that isn't enough to keep up with the maintenance required, and often we have to look for other sources of revenue. And the council has been awarded, as part of its LUF grant from MHCLG, that £20 million grant. Approximately 800,000 of that has been earmarked for beach hut maintenance and upkeep. So between those two funds this year, we hope to invest a substantial sum in the beach hut asset base. With regards to the beach lodges, overnight holiday accommodation, we've got 24 lodges at Manor Steps in Boscombe, and we have a further overnight lodge at Steamer Point in Christchurch. We keep these under review, but at this stage we have no plans to sell that site, but we do need to market it as best we can, keep it up to a high standard, and ensure that we keep occupancy levels up to industry standards or higher. And there's a lot of work going on in the background to try to achieve that. With regards to cliff stabilisation, the LUF grant that I mentioned, about £4.5 million, I think, is earmarked for East Cliff stabilisation work specifically. That is part of a much wider programme of cliff stabilisation, and colleagues within my department and Matt's department work closely to monitor, assess and design cliff stabilisation works at a wide range of sites. Many of you will know about the West Cliff slip, but we've had minor slips and movement at a variety of sites across the whole of the seafront, and we're ensuring that we've got a programme to actively monitor those and intervene where necessary. Should the council wish to have further detail about specifically which elements of the East Cliff scheme are delivered and when, then I would suggest we talk separately to this meeting.
It might be worth also noting that we did an item on ONS on cliff management and East Cliff, and well, all the areas really. I think it was in July, so it might be worth referring back to some of those to that
Matt,
presentation too.
I'm sorry, I think you might need to move the microphone a bit closer, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So Matt Hosey, Head of Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management. Anthony just covered the item well there, actually, with what we're doing. Just a reminder that we did a cliff management session for ONS back in July, so some of the notes and presentation from that, if they're available, might be worth circulating too if that wasn't received. But if we want another session on that, very happy to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. I've seen Councillor Beasley, and I think he was the next to indicate. So,
thank you very much, Chair. Well, Councillor Canavan just beat me to it, because my questions are around cliff stabilisation issues and about Bournemouth and Boscombe Piers. So if I could just go to the cliff stabilisation, and obviously my focus of interest is West Cliff, but equally I think that the whole of our cliff structure is critical to the resort. And I listened carefully to Mr. Rogers, and I think he mentioned the figure of 4.5 million allocated from grant to the East Cliff, Cliff Falls, which actually in the whole scheme of things for cliff stabilisation isn't a lot of money. These are very, very big, long-term, significant issues. I've rehearsed them previously, and indeed in the predecessor council in Bournemouth, we were very focused on it. My concern and my questions, I think, around this are very much around the longer term and the work that's currently happening or envisaged to happen, how that is going to be progressed. Because if we're not on top of this, we will have a much bigger, longer term problem for sure. And I would appreciate, as I'm sure Councillor Canavan would as well, regular updates from officers about what is happening, what's envisaged to happen, so that ward councillors can answer residents' concerns. Because it does lead to other issues, not least along the promenade, those using the beach and so on and so on. It also obviously affects the cliff lifts and other facilities that visitors and residents cherish here in the middle of Bournemouth. And so I think it needs a bit more unpacking for us to all understand, Chair, but it also requires, I think, quite a lot of follow through to interested ward councillors whose residents are affected directly. Can I deal with the peer issues once Mr. Rogers had a chance on cliff stabilisation? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. And Lindsay's just reminded me that one of the complexities of this service is that some of the work that this service does doesn't fall within the remit of our ward, but falls within the Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I think some of what you've just been referring to might fall more within that committee's work. I'm going to let officers explain better than me which bits of what they do fall within what we're here to talk about tonight. But just I just wanted to mention that at this point. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, so Matt Hosey again, Head of Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management. I would say we work quite jointly on it actually, so you're right, it does span across several of us that are sat here. Some good news on what you said, completely agree with all the complexities of it and the implications of land instability. We got £404,000 in local levy about 2.5 years ago to complete a cliff management strategy, which actually aims to set out all of those complexities and all of the actions we undertake as services which have an input to the cliff environment. That will be finished in March, so we're well on our way with that. What we did do in the early stages is recognising the risks that imposes on us, is form a cliff management working group, which we didn't have previously. So Amanda is the senior responsible owner on that group, and Anthony and I both sit on that group to report in and give actions to our services, as it were, where they're appropriate. So that strategy really, I guess, helped us target that input from us as officers. We are looking this year at some of the priority things that we need to sort, that being some of the drainage infrastructure that's in the cliff, primarily the sand drains. We've been allocated £1.4 million to look at where the highest risk is and what actions are needed the soonest. But you are right as well in that the infrastructure and keeping the infrastructure working to mitigate the risk of land instability is very expensive. Millions of pounds were spent decades ago, and they're old assets now. So if we want to keep our cliff stable, we need to invest in those to keep it in that condition. So yeah, I agree. And I think, I guess as an answer to that, when that cliff management strategy comes towards completion, it'll be a really good time to reconvene, I guess, with ONS and to talk about what that's going to be providing us. And one of those parts will be like a maintenance manual as to what we need to do to keep the infrastructure running and working effectively. But it's creating also a huge asset database for us. So we're understanding each section of cliff that we've got. They're very different. The geology changes, the risks change, the infrastructure on it changes. So we've got 192 assets listed, each with their own unique behaviours, as it were, or risks within it. So we're logging all of that and understanding what happens on our cliff frontage, so we can act accordingly.
Thank
But
you.
again, I think perhaps I'll refer back to the meeting we had in July as well. There might be some good outputs there, which might help clear some of those questions too.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Herrick, you wanted to come in?
Yes, and Matt's actually raised the 2 points that I was going to, is that the work done at ONS Place back in July was actually at my request as a cabinet member. So it was really important that we put that out there about how important they are as an asset to the area and how difficult they are to manage, and the work that the FSM or SWFC team do to keep them as good as they can. And but yeah, as pointed out, we need millions and millions and millions of pounds to look at that. And I think it's the cliff management strategy that is coming forward. Probably be keen to take back to Environment and Place at the right time.
Thank you. Councillor Beasley, you had a second area
Yes, I did, Chair.
question.
And I'm sure that Mr Rogers and colleagues will come back to ward councillors in the way that I expressed earlier on, because that is really the point of contact that we need. And I'm sure the same is true on the East Cliff. And we need that relatively regularly, but we need it fairly soon as well, because there are building concerns, as there have been throughout the summer actually this year on the West Cliff, and that needs to be addressed directly with ward councillors so that we understand the strategy better than we can from a report. So I'd appreciate that, and I'm sure others would too. My other question concerns the piers, most particularly Bournemouth Pier and Boscombe Pier. So we all know the structural work that's been required, again, a lot of similarities, very, very expensive, very long term, and we risk losing the facility altogether if we're not on top of all of that. And I wondered whether officers could give us an update on both piers in terms of structural works and future budgets and responsibilities of the authority, to get a better idea of, are we keeping pace? Are we falling behind what we've done before, or are we actually getting to grips and getting slightly ahead?
Thank you, Councillor. Who would like to respond to that? Anthony?
Thank you, Chair. So there are 4 historic piers and pontoons across BCP. The council has recently refurbished Lake Pier. It's replaced the floating head on Muddyford Pontoon, and it plans to undertake repairs to the fixed walkway on that structure as well. With regards to Boscombe and Bournemouth Pier, Boscombe, there was some works done as part of the regeneration scheme. I think it was about 2008-9, and that changed the structure overall. Some of those works undertaken at that time are beginning to show signs of wear, and we've got those being monitored at the moment. In particular, some of the props and piles at the head, the furthest bit from the beach, are starting to break up, and we are expecting to need to undertake some interventions there in the coming years. And we're working closely with Matt's team and with advisors WSP to determine what the nature of those works look like, where the priorities lie, what the timeframes are, and of course, importantly, what the costs might look like. So finally, with Bournemouth Pier, I think most members will know that we, as part of that LUF funding, LUF award, approximately half of it, and about £9.5 million, was earmarked for Bournemouth Pier substructural concrete works. And I use that phrase carefully because there's lots of wooden elements to Bournemouth Pier, but we're specifically targeting the concrete support beams and piles, of which, believe it or not, there are about 1,000 of those. It's a complex structure. It is showing significant signs of wear in places, and it's taken a while to fully understand the nature of those works, and again prioritise which elements to undertake. That has helped us put together a tender package that is currently being advertised at the moment. We have a number of interested parties in that, number of contractors keen to work with us to deliver that work, and the date for submissions will be closing shortly. it'll take us between probably the best part of now and Christmas to be able to go through those submissions, clarify any points with the contractors, and be able to select a preferred bidder. Once we've done that and we're able to draw up contracts and they're able to mobilise, and we anticipate a compound for those works being on the old Valentino site near the town centre, then we hope to be able to start undertaking works around March next year. That's the current plan. There's a few caveats to that. Importantly, the weather. If there's further damage to the pier during the winter, then it may impact some of the works. The tender submissions, we don't know how many we will get or what the quality is, but we do hope to be able to award that contract later this year and start working on it. And it'll probably take 12 to 18 months to deliver all of the works. And again, it depends on the scope. You know, we're working within a budget. We're focused on the concrete substructural works. If the budget, we will know once those submissions are in as to whether the budget can stretch to all of those, or whether we need to prioritise some of those works, or indeed whether we can address some of the other issues with the wooden foundations or piled foundations on the landing stages, which are a completely separate structure, but they are obviously closely aligned and on the periphery of the pier. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a feel for where we are across those structures.
Thank you very much. Councillor Herrick, you indicated you wanted to come in as well, I think.
I think it's really important that everyone understands that we're going to spend a really significant amount of money on the pier and have not a lot to show for it above the water. Obviously, we, as Anthony's taken us through, that is, you know, it's concrete substructure that's being addressed, and it obviously holds the entire pier up. But we are going to be spending a lot of money that's not going to be very visible to people, and I think it's really important that we lay that out very clearly.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I had Councillor Walters next, and just to reassure Councillor Aikenhead, I have seen her, and I have seen you as well, Councillor Tarling. Councillor Walters.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question about some of the growth opportunities. So the film office, increase in location film production across BCP. How does one go about increasing film production? You know, what steps do you have to take in order to achieve that?
Hi, I'm Helen Wildman, Head of Leisure and Events. So the film office originally came about working with our economic development team. We've built a new website. We're working with creatives locally, with partners such as the Arts University Bournemouth, and working. We've got a steering group within that works to how we develop and get the location out and advertise everything right across BCP. And the website was launched last July and continues to do well. Inquiries and inquiries are coming in both on a local basis and a wider basis.
And then I suppose declaring an interest slightly. I'm organising a wedding right now, but joined up wedding offer across BCP Council. How do you join up a wedding offer?
You don't get a discount.
So at the minute, we obviously have wedding offers at Upton Country Park and at Highcliffe, and we also have the ability to hold weddings at Branksome Dean Chine room, and I know that because I went to one. And have I missed a location?
Yeah, we're working here as well in terms of the civic.
Yeah, obviously, yeah, the civic, the various civic offers we've got, of course. But yeah, joining that up and enabling people to kind of find best deals and negotiate deals with local suppliers and things like that to just join up that offer. I just want to go back to the film office. Is that the film office is really good at developing quite a lot of economic value in a variety of places. For example, the UBET filming that took place in the early spring, the hoteliers were really pleased with that because they got multiple bookings on multiple rooms for multiple nights for that in a part of the season they don't normally see them. So it drives economic value in kind of loads of different ways, and obviously gets us really good profile on the telly as well.
Thank you. So I think next on my list was Councillor Tarling.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have to declare an interest I hadn't spotted about. I'm a member of Hengistbury Head Outdoor Centre, but I notice it's not, no decisions being made here on it, so I don't think I need to exclude myself from it. There's just one point I was making on page 20 where you talk about stakeholders. There's no mention of any of the town or parish councils in Christchurch as being key stakeholders, and I think that's a bit of an oversight in the report. I think it's something as a town councillor, perhaps I would declare that as an interest as well. I'd like to see some more engagement with the town council on our strategy. I know it happens, but you know, in the report it would be quite useful to see that. But otherwise, a very good report. Just picking up on one of the points you're making about the works on the pier, just a quick inquiry. Is there anything related to the MMO license on that that's going to impinge or be a constraint on the works?
Chair, the MMO licensing applies to almost all of the works to the pier structures. There are a number of environmental conditions for us to consider. The timing of those works can sometimes be disruptive, actually, to their use and purpose, but it's essential to ensure that we get the MMO licensing. Matt's team often advise us with regards to that, being the coastal experts. But yeah, it's an important step in the process, and often drives what we can do and when.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go online now to Councillor Aikenhead, who has a question.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So I've got a number of questions, but they are all quite different from the questions you've had so far. It's been really interesting listening to everything so far, and I recognise that quite a lot of the emphasis of the questions that were asked in the KLOE were about the seafront part of commercial operations. But I have some more general questions about the structure of commercial operations and just some kind of background as to why it is how it is. So I actually have 5 different questions, but I think it makes sense for me to ask them all together because they're all about the whys and wherefores and the asking questions about the structure. So are you okay with me asking them all together?
Yes, Sue, go ahead. And I think if we need to take them, break them up a bit, we'll know once we've heard them. So,
Okay, that's
thank
great.
you.
Okay, so the first question is the new post that has been created. I heard it described as a there's now 5 areas of commercial operations, but then it's described as a post. So I wanted to know a little bit more about the commercial operations, the 5th bit that's been added, as to what is that just a post? Is it just a role, someone who's liaising, or is it an actual department? And what responsibilities will they have, and what will they be covering? So that's like one question. My next question was, I see leisure partnership and development manager down there in tier 5, and I wondered if that's where sport goes. But I just wondered, where does actually BCP Leisure go? Because there doesn't appear to be a manager for BCP Leisure here. So which bit does it go under? Another similar question, are museums in commercial operations? And if so, where are they? Which bit do they come under? And then there's just kind of some questions about the logic of it. So given that commercial operations is mostly, or it says in description, mostly about ways that BCP gets income, why is the flood risk in commercial operations at all? What is the logic for having something that clearly isn't going to be making us money? It's a service that we provide, really important service, but what is the logic of that being part of commercial operations? And kind of a similar question, arts and culture development. Again, this is not something that we expect to make money out of. So why is that in commercial part of a commercial operations department? And my last question is, will the residence card be in commercial operations? And if so, where will that go? So it's all about what goes where and why.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Who would like to start? Amanda. Let's start with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope I've noted down your questions correctly, but if I miss anything, please do say. So I think the first one was around the new role of the head of commercial operations. So you're absolutely right. It is a role, it is a post. It does not currently have a team of either staff or services that sit within that area. I think what's really important to note is we have a great team across all our other 4 services that already deliver a huge amount of commercial activity. But the head of commercial operations role will assist with working across those service areas as well as other council teams to be able to help drive some of the strategic action that's needed to see some commercial movement and investment and identify new opportunities. In terms of the leisure partnership and development manager, so that is within the leisure and events area, and the BCP leisure area does sit underneath that post. The staff member that's identified in the report started in that role only very recently, but was a previous staff member within the authority, so they have an understanding of how all that works, and the sport elements will connect into that post. In relation, I think the next one was around museums. Within commercial operations, we have Highcliffe Castle and Upton Country Park, but we don't have the museums in relation to, so Poole Museum and Russell Copes currently sit within operations, but not within commercial operations. They're not within my directorate. But we do work very closely with them. So with some of the items already spoken about this evening, such as weddings, and also when we're looking at wider strategies around heritage, we do work closely with them. What we do have, though, is a connection with some of the national portfolio organisations that sit within the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area. So that does sit within commercial operations. That's more of a relationship management item. In relation to the FSEM team, so they do have a shared service approach. So they work very closely with East Devon Council currently, which provides FSEM related activity to them, which allows us to generate income into the authority for the time that is spent delivering those activities. So there was a connection in relation to that in where they were sitting, but also because of the close connection to the seafront area of the service in the cliff management item. Okay. And then the arts and cultural development area currently under leisure and events. At the time that came into commercial operations, there were some other wider structural changes happening. And because of the connection that we had with events who worked closely with them to deliver the Arts by the Sea Festival, and also with Highcliffe Castle and Upton Country Park, it felt like it was a good fit for them to be able to have a connection to other teams that they work closely with. I feel like I'm missing something, but I can't recall what the last question was, sorry.
The last one was about the residence card and where that's, will that come under your area or will that be in a different area? It's okay if you don't know yet.
So the likelihood is it will remain in the investment and development kind of team, because they run the economic development team who have a lot of the relationships outside the council. obviously, as we'll come to later, they're working closely with the commercial commercial operations team and to deliver that. And obviously, as the portfolio holder across those two areas, that's kind of one of the reasons that it became mine. And just as when we're talking about cross-portfolio work, obviously we have Councillor Andy Martin that looks after culture, and then Councillor Hadley that looks after the FSAM team. But we regularly kind of work together, and it kind of works pretty well because we get joint input into these things.
Okay, thank you. You have answered all my questions. That's great. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Councillor and officers. And then I have Councillor Wright had his hand raised, and so I'll come to him next.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to seafront strategy. Something I get emails a lot is the sand on the prom. You talk a lot about access here, and I happened to cycle along it this morning from Shore Road to Hengistbury Head, and I noticed there's a lot of sand build up, especially around the access areas in the pool end. But as I got up near Southbourne and Boscombe, a tractor had obviously been along with some sort of snowplow type thing on the front and been scraping it all the way. But I've never seen that in Poole. Is there a different strategy in Bournemouth than there is in Poole? I've seen them doing it by hand, but I've never seen a machine or tracks from a machine in Poole. And I was out with one of the rangers the other day who hinted that there was a different strategies for Bournemouth and Poole. For example, the rubbish tractor that picks up all the rubbish off the beach from around Bournemouth doesn't go down to Poole. I wondered why that is.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So all of the litter and the sand management is coordinated from the waste transfer station at next to Durley Environmental Hub at Durley Beach. They have to carefully assess where the need is, and that can change across the year. For example, in the summer months, a lot of the work is about grooming the sand and litter picking. In the winter months, it is about battling to try and keep the promenade clear of sand. And the way in which they do that, they have to make priorities. So, you know, top things on that list will be trying to ensure that key access and emergency access points are clear, that the car park at Undercliff Promenade is clear, that the concessionaires and seafront businesses are able to access and trade. So they have to work through a list of priorities, and that will determine where they are deployed. Quite often, because of the geology and the way the weather fronts hit the beaches, the sand build-up tends to be worse from Boscombe heading east, in particular around Southbourne. You can see significant build-up of sand compared to, say, sandbanks. However, sand does build up at times as well, in particular when the sand is dry and the winds are strong. So there is, we have to make a judgment where the need is. Excuse me. I should have said at the start, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat, Chair, so my apologies. But there is a clear plan to try to keep as much of the promenade clear of sand as we possibly can. And we have 3 tractors or tractor drivers up until earlier this year. We have increased that to a team of 4 to try to get on top of it. And also those tractor teams are deployed to Christchurch as well, because we know that particular Avon and Friars, you can get, it's a different type of build. It tends to be stones actually on the promenade at Avon, but that can build up too. So it depends on what's required and where as to where the teams are deployed, but certainly they are deployed across Bournemouth and Poole.
Thank you. And Councillor Herrick, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, one of my favourite topics, which is that the beach is 2 metres higher than it was about 30 years ago, and part of that is coastal erosion defence, but obviously that does mean that we end up with a lot more sand on the prom than obviously used to happen when it was 2 metres lower. And the other one is that a storm event can create 6 weeks worth of work for the seafront team. So really, obviously that would be a significant storm, but obviously recent winds have probably driven up quite a lot of sand onto the various parts of the beach.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright, has that answered your question? Okay, lovely. So I'm moving on. Sorry, moving on to Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I had been struggling with some of the initials and the abbreviations, but I had a eureka moment on those, so I'll spare you that. But going back to an earlier comment, I do find not totally convinced that arts and culture fits in with commercial operations. I think commercial operations, by its nature, devalues arts and culture. I would have thought it would have stood more easily alongside education, community development and such like, because you know, it should not be necessarily a commercial operation, although obviously you need a commercial element to theatres and arts venues to sort of help support the non-commercial side. So I was just really going to make the comment that I don't think it's necessarily a good match, because I do fear that it could devalue the value of what we're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Herriot.
Yeah, I'd just like to offer reassurance. It's not operated as a commercial operation, but it sits within in this kind of area due to practicalities around a lot of the events that are operated and the relationship management. But as a portfolio, it's run by a different councillor to myself.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Goodall.
Yeah, I'm just really seeking some clarification, if I may. It was we were talking earlier, or there was reference earlier to crossover between other ONS committees. One of the things that hasn't appeared on this review is Southern Inshore Fisheries, and I just wondered, because there's one of our biggest industries and commercial industries is the fishing. CIFCA is both an enforcement and an environmental agency. It's not mentioned, and I just wondered, I'm not sure how to phrase the question really, but is there a way that we can get with CIFCA, the fishing industry and one thing another, to bring more information or even how can I put this? We're not promoting. I think what I'm trying to say is we're not promoting the fishing industry as well as we might under this commercial side of our industry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether that would sit within this directorate. Councillor Herriot, did you want to respond?
Yes, it doesn't, as far as I'm aware. But I'd certainly be happy to meet and explore opportunities that we might have to kind of work together. Obviously, Poole Harbour itself is run by Poole Harbour Commissioners, which is a separate entity to the council again, but we do work with them. So I think if there's opportunity there, we'd be more than happy to meet.
Can I just make a comment on that? It was thank you very much indeed. It's just that there are huge things that go on, activities that go on in places like northern France and that sort of thing, with oyster festivals and one thing and another. And the last one I went to on Poole Harbour had one which had fish as part of its statement, and it just had one fishing ban. I mean, it was raining and it was a miserable day, and I understand all that, but given the nature of it, I would have thought we could have done better.
So our events team do support the wonderful ladies that put on the Seafood and Sound event on Poole Quay. One of the really significant issues for those businesses that do put stuff on Poole Quay is that historically what happened is you got a load of pop-up traders for the day, they took all the money, and the businesses spent a lot of time and energy putting on the event for a lot of effort and not much return. So that event is specifically designed at driving trade into the restaurants, and there's a lot of seafood on Poole Quay as it is, and that's very specifically to do that for those local businesses.
May I ask another question, please?
Yes.
Thank you. This is to do with parking, if I may. I'm just curious, is there a review of parking going on at the moment?
So currently we have a really significant bit of work going on around permits in particular. We've got a lot of permits out there that have not been merged and kind of combined post BCP's existence. That's the bit of work that's going on. That had to be paused in the summer because obviously we've got the parking trial on the seafront, and that took up a lot of officer time to get that up and running very quickly. But that work is ongoing.
May I, sorry, as a ward councillor, just make a plea that when I ask about parking and whether there can be a review in an area, in this case mine, that I get a response about parking, because we're coming up with suggestions as ward councillors and at the sharp end, so to speak, and I didn't get any responses at all. So I'd really appreciate some feedback. Thank you.
If that was me, very sorry. But I'm more than happy to go back through my emails and check if I've missed anything. But yeah, at the minute, we're not taking any further permit schemes to allow that work to be completed. But we know that we're going to be able to then kind of take some through with some framework in place.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other councillors who wanted to ask anything or make any comments? I wanted to make a comment then, if I may. So as I was reading through the report, which is really interesting and really helpful for me to get a better understanding of the directorate, thank you for it. I think as Councillor Aikenhead touched on, probably because of the questions in the key lines of inquiry, there was quite a strong focus on the seafront service, and I found that most of my questions were ending up quite detailed about the seafront services. But given that this was a wider scope report, I'm not proposing I'm going to ask a barrage of really specific questions now. But the sort of overall thing in my mind that I did want to ask now was, it struck me that we do generate an income from the seafront services overall. It costs us a lot to run it all, but we make money. But it's not a massive amount given how much, to my mind, given how much of an asset those 15 miles of beaches are. And I note what has been said about the new post, the head of commercial operations. And what I was just wondering is the plan that new role will be developing perhaps a more strategic approach, a more costed out full plan, business plan to look at what we can do more of in terms of maximising income from the seafront, because I see there's a service plan and it's good, but I'm missing like really a detail, like, you know, we're doing this much here, but we think in 5 years' time we could be doing this amount more with it. That kind of detail level of plans. Does that make sense as a question? Thank you.
So that's exactly what that head of commercial operations role has been brought about to do, is to release some capacity and work across services and things like that. I think it has to be said that the seafront is a really complex thing with a lot of landowner agreements that impact how and what you can do in certain places. Obviously, a lot of it is very seasonally driven. As a former manager of a seasonal business, the percentages involved are not that far away when you kind of break it down. And I didn't have to rake sand with tractors on a daily basis. And yeah, it essentially boils down to that the percentages of operating a business, that's a business, what is essentially within the council at that scale is really, but yeah, absolutely looking, and that's part of the seafront strategy, is balancing that kind of like natural asset that we have and what our residents want to see against the commerciality, and where we can really kind of stretch some of the commercial aspects so that we can raise some money from that back for our residents.
Thank you. And so the sort of next question from that is, given that post is new and that person is new in post, do you have a sense of a timescale on developing a plan? More, I think what I'm trying to get to is, when would be a good time for potentially for the board to revisit this and find out more about how the plans are developing to increase our commercial revenue from all these different projects. Does that make sense?
So I think it's probably early days, especially given the scope of what they've got to work across, because obviously that's not just their role is not just seafront. But I'm thinking probably at this point, happy to stay in touch and really scope that out so you can get into the early part of that so that you can make an impact without it being too soon that there's no impact to be made.
Okay, thank you. So I think probably everybody's had an opportunity now to ask or speak on anything they wanted to. This was for the board's information and for us to make any comments that we wish to. I think everybody's probably put the points across that they wanted to. I want to thank Councillor Herriott, and I want to thank Amanda and all the other officers for your time and for bringing this through to us. I think it is an area I have a hand. Councillor Butt, did you want to come in before we move on?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Extremely interesting debate. If I could go back and be a little parochial, I think as we all tend to be when we come along to these meetings, I looked at the obviously the report and the headline with regard to what is happening at Upton House with regard to repair to the portico and colonnades. Now, clearly, repairs are an absolute requirement, and one wouldn't want to refuse those in any way, shape, or form. And my concern is, over the last few years, there seems to be, to me and to others, a general sort of creep as to what SIL funding is being used for. And it does speak about SIL funding in the report, where SIL funding is clearly there to service the actual original development of which the developers were charged to build. And there seem to be a lot of issues and examples as to when SIL funding is being used for what the populace and the public believe to be just general funding requirements, where there should be a budget and we should have obviously a budget set aside to maintain buildings, etc., etc. Now, we can't claim that in any way, shape, or form that Upton House was built by a developer, so it can't be maintenance in that context, where you could apply that perhaps to the bridge where some funding was used to SIL in the first place. So my concern is that we have limited funding available in our SIL pots, and I think that the public will take a very dim view of these SIL pots, especially in the current climate where funding is so scant anywhere, to funding what boils down to maintenance of buildings. Although, of course, the maintenance of Upton House, like any other maintenance of any other building in any other ward, is extremely important. So I do have concerns there about this sort of SIL use creep, and I'd be very pleased to hear from Glyn if he had any comments on that. Thank you.
Councillor Herriott, I think you probably wanted to respond initially.
Yeah, and I think actually we shared those concerns to a degree, and we brought forward the strategic SIL strategy earlier this year that went through cabinet that kind of laid out the priority for those schemes. What I will say is that sometimes some of these heritage schemes do require match funding to leverage in from heritage lottery and things like that. So I wouldn't say that we're going to shut down that as a potential source, but yeah, we did share those concerns, and we've actually kind of acted on that already.
Okay, thank you. And Glyn, did you want to respond as well?
I was going to say something very similar to Councillor Herriott. But what we'll do, Councillor Butt, is I'll get Wendy Lane, our Director of Planning, just to resend round the latest guidance on strategic SIL and SIL allocations.
Okay, thanks.
If I may just come back on that, thank you, Madam Chairman, just very quickly. Thank you, Councillor Herriott, for that. I was aware of that work going on, but I wasn't aware of the outcome. So I'd be extremely grateful to you, Mr. Barton, if you would kindly circulate that, because it is of great public interest. And obviously we're here to represent and serve our public, not ourselves. So I'd be extremely grateful if that could be sent to all councillors so we can advise our residents accordingly. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, and thank you. And Councillor Tarling is indicating he wants to say something at this point as well, I think.
Yeah, Councillor Butt mentioned about being parochial, and I am parochial because I'm a town councillor, and as such we get to use SIL funding as a town council, a proportion of that. So, you know, if Poole gets a town council, then it will have its own control of where it spends its SIL funding.
Thank you, Councillor Tarling, and that's a little taste of what
Was
next
that
week's going to be like, I think. Councillor Butt? Excuse me.
If that was a plug for Forest and Town Councils, I think it was very
Councillor
poorly
Butt,
told. And
thank
not a
you.
matter for the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Okay, so I was trying to sum up on that item, and I wanted just to say thank you again to the officers and to Councillor Herrick for the report. It's been very interesting. We've covered a lot. Personally, I think I would like us to, yes.
Just to be clear, it was mostly in fact, entirely the officers' work, the report. So please don't thank me for that.
All right. Well, then, no thanks to you. I would like to keep an eye as a board on the development of the new role, and particularly the focus that seems to be put on developing income generation from across these different services, because I think we all know that financially we need that to work as best it possibly can, given the situation that we're in. So if we can put this onto the work plan to review in 6 months, not necessarily to bring it back to the board at that point, but just to have a conversation and see where things have got to, then that would be, does that sound okay to the rest of the board as a suggestion for how we move forward on this area? Okay, great. Then that item is brought to a close, and thank you all very much for your time. I'm just going to allow a minute for the officers to okay, I'm being asked to take a 5-minute break before we move on to the next item. So just 5 minutes, and then we'll return. Thank you. Thank you, members. We are back and we are moving on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the residence card. This is an item of pre-cabinet scrutiny. We have again Councillor Herritt here to present the report, and with him we also have Amina Martin, the Director of Investment and Development, and Glyn Barton online, who is the Chief Operating Officer. And I think I'm right in saying that that's between the three of you are going to be presenting for this one. So I'll invite Councillor Herritt to start us off, please.
Hi, thank you. There are no slides on this one. I did check before I started speaking. So this was a manifesto commitment from the Lib Dems in 2023, making sure that residents felt like they were getting something better value and that the offer that tourists and visitors get. Due to financial pressures and the need therefore to deliver without introducing new budget, it's taken longer to get here than we would have liked, but we now have something that we feel is ready to launch. There is some risk, as outlined in the financial assessment. This is dependent on uptake and how it's delivered. There's obviously a lot of unknown in this, but we've set aside 500k in underspend from the last financial year to underwrite it should it really take off. As we go through the process, what we'll also gain is information about how people are using the card, what on, that will not only enable us to assess what the cost implications are like to be longer term, but also put together further offers and be strategic about pricing where we can differentiate between residents and visitors. The idea is this is the first phase of a wider rollout, and we'll be looking to include other offers in the future where appropriate, with future partners that are already emerging. It was interesting to hear this committee's view back in the budget setting process for last year about how digital versus physical cards should be approached in terms of funding. That's been helpful and incorporated here. Parking offer was by far the most difficult to figure out. As I've said before, parking balances congestion, climate, economy, accessibility and income. An extra hour should not encourage loads more additional short journeys, but can increase dwell time and spend per trip, allowing residents to visit cultural destinations, have an extra coffee, a lazier lunch, or as my daughter seems to have adopted age 12, just trying on never-ending amounts of clothes. The free swim will enable access to leisure centres, getting people into them where they might have used them before. And if you ask our public health professionals, as our health and wellbeing portfolio holder reminded me today, the single best thing we can do for people's health at the moment, besides getting them to stop smoking, is to increase access to activity. It will also act as a showcase for our facilities and could potentially drive membership in the future. Due to limitations within the current parking infrastructure, it is launched on surface-only car parks and the app at this time. We did look really strongly at how we might be able to do that, but with the what we have available to get this now up and running, having taken the time we have, we wanted to get it out, but that doesn't mean that we won't be able to get into that position in the future. And as I've spoken about, this is the start of a mechanism to give something back to residents, very much viewed by us as the start of work rather than the end of it. And if anyone wants to be involved from the private sector, we'd urge them to get in touch.
Thank you, Councillor Herritt. So was there anything further at this point, or shall I open up to the board for questions? Okay. So board members, if I can turn to you, and I see Councillor Trent indicating. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was rather surprised when I read this that a large amount of this is actually for people parking and motorists. And my first reaction to an hour was, well, that seems quite a generous starting point. But I kind of do wonder whether, well, I suppose it's a nice round figure, but I think that seems to be a very generous starting point. One thing that does concern me about that, however, is that it's tied to the parking app, and that straight away rings alarm bells for equalities with me. I'm one of what must be quite a lot of people in the area that don't actually use a parking app. In fact, if I need a parking app, I have to phone a friend, so to speak. But you know, I pay either by cash or by debit card, and the technology for a debit card or credit card would be much the same, I would have thought, as it would be with the store loyalty card. So if you go in Tesco's and it's sort of 50 pence less to buy a pint of milk or something that day with a Tesco's card, you just wave the card in front of it and it has the ability to take that off. And I'm wondering whether that side of things has been fully looked at. I know it's going to start somewhere. I must admit, looking at it, my initial reaction is, well, apart from the parking, you know, I don't go to leisure centres and things like that, but I can see it's a good starting point. But I am concerned about the equalities of not being able to use a technology other than the Ringo technology, because you know, I think that is potentially an issue for a lot of people, and it will mean that not everyone will be able to take advantage of the card. So,
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Councillor Harrott.
Yeah, so as I kind of got to in the introduction, we did try really hard to see where we could kind of get that without having to use the app. The issue is we've got kind of obviously a variety of different technology across surface car park, or all our car parks in all our town centres, and what we wanted was something that kind of worked across all of them. Yeah, so we've got machines kind of, for example, in Bournemouth Town Centre, that was already cashless pre-2019 by the multi-stories, and the multi-stories have been driven in that direction by repeated theft and vandalism. So essentially what we had was like having to introduce new technology into Bournemouth to take cash to enable that, and as well as new machines who could potentially then process the card. Now, it's not ruling that out in the future, because obviously those machines are kind of looking to replace them as part of a kind of the parking strategy that will come forward in some time. But yeah, they're the difficulties that we faced.
just come back and say that obviously is a separate issue, but the app only method of paying parking, I'm amazed that it sort of exists anywhere. I experienced it in St Austell for the first time, and people were getting in a right mess with it. And there was practically fisticuffs in the car park with people fighting over it, and you know, it just got totally bonkers. And so I really hope that you find something that enables more than just the Ringo to be used. But you know, it's worth looking at the technology that is in store cards, and you know, it's been many years that those have been in operation, whether there's actually something that could be used, so at least those that pay by credit or debit card can benefit from it. I know you couldn't do it for cash very easily, but you know, I do think that there is, you know, existing technology that might actually help expand it. And in an ideal world, I would even reduce the free parking period slightly to pay for it, but that's another story.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to respond again, Councillor Harrott?
Yeah, and we know that technology is out there. It is just literally the kind of the connectivity of the machines and the investment in those machines at the right time that we can do in the future. But yeah, absolutely, it's there and looking at. For context, currently 7% of our car park vends, which is the amount of times obviously that someone actually parks, is cash, and only 4% of our income is coming through that, and more than 50% in the pound of a cash vend is in cost, whereas obviously for the app vend it is pennies. But that's not what the kind of the issue is here. It is just a technology of outdated, or not even outdated, but much older legacy machines in various parts of the conurbation.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Aikenhead, I think you were next.
Thank you. Okay, so I think it's a very good manifesto commitment to have, to want to give something to give something to residents to make them to allow them to get something, that's great. But I think it's really important, and I'm sure you all agree it's really important that it's given fairly. So my first problem with this is the same as Councillor Trent has raised, allowing an hour of free parking for anyone who does it on the app, but those people who are maybe a little bit more elderly and don't use the app, also maybe people who have a cheaper mobile phone and they can't get coverage, so they don't get that, which is a huge amount of the offer. So that's one thing that I have a little bit of a problem with. The second thing, I recognise that you're trying to solve that, which is good. The second thing is, I just wondered if maybe you had considered trying to make part of the offer more something including public transport, given that I know the administration has spent a lot of effort trying to get people out of their cars and travelling in different ways. I would have thought that maybe the bus companies would have been interested in maybe some sort of discount, because then that could even actually increase their revenue as well. I recognise that you're going to expand things later, but I think that for an initial offer, it would have been a very good look, or it would be a very good look if you can negotiate it before it starts, to have public transport in there as well as parking, because then you are helping to reduce congestion at the same time, which is obviously one of the other goals of the administration. The third thing that concerns me is there's very little detail in this report about the exemptions. It's talked about and it said we hope we'll have some more, but it's very hazy about who will get an exemption from the cost and who won't. And again, if we want things to be fair, what we need to make sure is that nobody is excluded from this, because they are worried about being able to afford the initial membership fee. I think these things are all things that need to be thought about carefully, and they're not just technical things, they are political things. So whether or not who you give exemptions to is a political decision. Whether you include or exclude certain people because of whether they have smartphones or not, that is again a political decision. And so I was a little bit surprised that the recommendation said that we should be delegating this to officers to do the rest of the details and then to get on with it, without it even going back to the portfolio member. I would have thought that this should really go back to the cabinet once those details are fixed and known. And at the very least, it should go back to the portfolio holder, because there should be some political oversight on this, because those things that are outstanding are very much political decisions, not just operational. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Councillor Herrick, did you want to come back?
Yeah, so with regards to the buses, obviously what we're doing at the minute and the cost, as it were, is risk to council income streams. Obviously, if we go out to the buses, they would expect payment for any subsidy. And obviously through the BCP at the minute, we are subsidising quite a lot of work in buses in terms of evening routes, in terms of obviously the pound after 7 p.m. So at this point, obviously with that BCP investment going in, it was felt kind of that was not where we would go. That doesn't preclude it in the future, and obviously the future of buses is up for discussion in Parliament at the minute, and there might be quite a lot of significant movement on that over the coming years. We're already looking at kind of access to leisure as a separate piece that we committed to at a previous ONS meeting, which will ultimately, I think, link into this. But I understand where Councillor Aikenhead's coming from. We did consider Beryl as well, sorry, on the back onto the sustainable transport. But again, that's payment going outside of the council rather than the council taking risks on within it. the smartphone, we're at 76% of people that are using cashless payments. My parents-in-law at 75 are using kind of cashless payments, and I think we took whether we could do it, and we really would like to get there. It's just that to get this out the door, we need to kind of get started on it. Otherwise, we'll just be waiting for absolute perfect, and at the minute, we're probably not in a position to deliver that.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Canavan next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not quite sure where to start, really. I mean, thank you very much for bringing this here, but it tells me very little about what I'd like to know. It doesn't feel a finished piece of work in my view. So let's start with the free parking. I'm not sure I entirely share Councillor Trent's analysis that this is generous, but is 1 hour free parking per visit, per day, or per week? So that's one question. It also, in terms of parking, the report highlights the car parks that is going to be included within the scheme. One of which is at the leisure centre in Christchurch, which is a car park I use fairly frequently. So my understanding is that users of the leisure facilities in that area are able to purchase a permit from the council for frequent use. I'd like to know how this affects those permits that are available to those users. So just picking up again on Councillor Aikenhead's point about exemptions. I mean, one of the things that I would like to suggest and to see included in this are some determined, for us to be able to determine what those exemptions are. And the thing that is particularly in my mind is those families that are accessing free school meals, and could they be included in that exemption, and could they be included now? So I understand the offer that is being made. I guess my question is, well, what else was considered, and why else? Is that all there is? Are there any additional things that have been considered but have been ruled out for whatever reason? I think the other thing that I'm not clear about, one of the other things I'm not clear about, is the cost of this. Is it going to be entirely free for residents? Is it going to be entirely free for businesses who might want to acquire it on behalf of their staff within those businesses? Because I'm genuinely not clear about whether or not there is going to be any kind of charge at any stage for anybody within this scheme. Right? So I would welcome some clarification on that. And my last question, thank you for your tolerance, Chair, it is in relation to the leisure facilities, because that offer relates entirely, well, as I read it, it relates entirely to swimming. I have to confess I can't swim, but I would be interested to know whether it included the option of being able to access the gym and that kind of equipment within the leisure centre. So if you would be kind enough to answer those, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Councillor Herritt, are you able to come back on some of those points? Yeah.
I tried to keep up, so if I missed anything, I apologise.
Thanks.
So the charge is in paragraph 17. So we're anticipating a charge of between £5 and £10 to get the card. That was came through the overview and scrutiny process for budget setting last year, because we knew there was likely to be a charge, an administrative charge for a physical card, and this committee asked that was considered fairly across the two things. And what that enables us to do is do this to deliver this at a relatively cost neutral position as possible to the council, whilst also not kind of charging people who aren't interested in these things to do it. The gym, I think we could absolutely look at as we go forwards. But again, this is a swimming offer at the minute, so that, again, trying to deliver this at zero cost. The gym offer was deemed a little bit too complex to do at this point, but we can take that back. The permit use at Christchurch, I would have to take away, but obviously that's a slightly different thing, and we are reviewing permits at the moment. But it was town centre classification. Exemptions, I think we can absolutely look at, and we should be probably looking a little harder at those, maybe looked at them a little harder already. But obviously we need to treat that equitably and make sure we're really balancing that. So if we end up with a lot of too many exemptions, then obviously the scheme becomes much less viable. And we do have additional organisations coming through. I don't think we're in a position to announce any of them yet, but I would hope that we're going to have some private deals to offer by the time we get, hopefully to Cabinet, or certainly by the time we get to launch. We've already had, since we've put this in the press last week, people approaching us to join in as well.
Councillor Canavan.
Thank you. It does rather lead into Councillor Aikenhead's earlier point about this is a lot of ifs and a lot of we will look at it, but where does it go? Because from what I can see, in terms of the recommendation, we're effectively delegating the finer detail to a couple of people, and we will get an opportunity to look at the scheme when it's finalised, until somebody somewhere has actually decided what it's going to be. So I'm just wondering at what opportunity there will be for us to come back and look at those finer details, to look at what exemptions there are, and whether or not there are any enhancements that could be made to the offer. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Herrick, can you clarify what, if any, opportunity there would be?
So sorry, we were just clarifying something amongst ourselves. So I apologise for not really. I thought I got the gist of the question, but the so it will be. It obviously goes from here to Cabinet, and Cabinet will then look to delegate that. Now, a lot of our officer decisions are not made in isolation. There's always portfolio holder involvement in a lot of them, unless they're very kind of reactive. That said, obviously, it's within this committee's power to ask that we delegate that to the portfolio holder and for Cabinet to consider it. And I'm happy to consider it and see if we need to make an adjustment that it comes at least back to the portfolio holder.
If I can just also add, we did bring the proposals forward to ONS working group last year, and so we had a number of scenarios that we were considering at that point. So Councillor Canavan asked what other options we've considered. One of our key priorities was to make sure that this was cost neutral, or at least had a limited impact on budgets. And so the options that we have as phase one, and we're calling that phase one because that is going through the financial modelling due diligence that we've undertaken. It's the most robust options at the moment, but we did bring forward a number of options through ONS scrutiny previously, and therefore that's been through that process, and we've then, as of today, bring forward a Cabinet paper which is more firm offer, having gone through that with informal Cabinet members as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Northover, I think, was next. I haven't forgotten anyone. It's just we've got quite a few people waiting.
Is it working? Can you hear me?
I think it's working.
Yeah, my question is just really about the leisure part and the swimming. I just wondered, is it BCP leisure centres, does that include Beach Live? This already know, I think. And then also, do they actually have capacity? Because like, I go to the BH Live leisure centre, and the swimming's quite often booked up already. So I wonder how like you would manage potentially a huge number of people wanting to book, because that might be the only reason they get the cards. So they might sort of think of it as I've paid £10 to get 12 free swims, basically. That might be what you actually think. So then you're going to try and make the most of that. I don't know if that, I don't know how much on board are the leisure centres. Are they happy with it?
So BH Live, we did invite them as to whether they wanted to take part at this point, but they're not ready yet. So that leaves us with the BCP leisure facilities. They're confident they can deal with the capacity. They've done the modelling to see where this will end up. Obviously, if we end up with all 400 100,000 or so residents wanting to go at the same time. Firstly, we would have probably quite a problem, but our anticipated take-up suggests that we should be able to kind of deal with that.
Just, just thinking about it myself, that probably was the only thing that would be something I would want to do, but it's not actually there because there isn't even one near me. So I just feel like there's a lot of people for whom there really isn't anything on offer for them much as it's written at the moment. But I appreciate there might be things in the pipeline.
So yeah, things in the pipeline, and as well, that's one of the reasons that we have applied the administrative charge amongst the feedback, was that obviously then therefore it's an opt-in rather than everyone can have it and they don't feel like they're getting value, so they're opting in to get those additional benefits.
So I just want to answer Councillor Canavan's previous question about how often is it used. So it's essentially per visit for the parking.
Hang on. So, could we speak with the microphones because no one else can hear?
So does that mean that I could go from Paul for have an hour, Bournemouth to an hour, Christchurch for an hour, have 3 hours in one day?
If you were so inclined, yes.
I think Glyn might have been waiting patiently to come in for a while. Is that the case, Glyn?
No, I was just going to clarify that. Obviously, Councillor Wright, if you were to go from Christchurch to Bournemouth to Poole, you'd have to buy the £2 or the 2 hours minimum, whatever the minimum charge at those car parks is first. So you'd be doing a lot of parking in each of the areas and hopefully spend a lot of time in our town centres and spending money in those town centres. So yeah, it is possible, but you have to pay for the minimum parking duration in each of those car parks as well.
Thank you, that's helpful. Councillor Wright, you were next on my list, so go ahead officially.
So obviously it was that makes it even more less value than what Councillor Canavan said. So you can't just get a free hour. You have to pay for 3 hours to get a free hour in effect. Is that right?
So the free period starts after the minimum. So you could buy 2 and get 1 free, buy 3 and get 1 free. And the idea of that is, as I kind of outlined at the start, is we're balancing all of those things that parking balances, but looking to increase dwell time in the town centres through that method without kind of impacting too far income, climate, congestion, and all those other things that parking feeds into.
Which, yeah, like I say, seems even worse value for money. Would it not be just better to do 3 hours a week free completely? And then you could, you can get a bit done in 3 hours. I could certainly do all my shopping in 3 hours, but I'm not sure the wife could. And also, I think that would be a much better idea if we had 3 hours completely free once a week. It'd be really easy to administer as well. All you'd need is something stuck on the dashboard, or the parking guys with their little machines see that, they just wouldn't do anything with it. You could do it with a black deck of playing cards. There's 52 of them, isn't there? The other thing is 9:30 in the morning. Why 9:30 and till what time? Because it sort of knocks out people doing a bit of shopping in the evening if it's around 5 o'clock on the way home from work maybe, and that's quite a good way of cutting the journey down if you're doing it on the way back from somewhere or on the way to somewhere.
Councillor Herrick or
so after 9:30 in the morning to kind of stop kind of looking for people working in the town centres and really to kind of drive the shopping and the retail and the cultural element, and it runs until 3 into the evening, so it can be kind of through to the next kind of cycle.
I think was Councillor Goodall was next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, if I may. The first thing was about the timing of it and actually beginning it in the summer I'm no expert, but wouldn't it be easier to do it start it in the winter, so there's fewer things going on before you build up, and people start coming in and businesses start saying, oh, I want to be part of this. The other question was, who is a resident? Will it be, so you've got a 17-year-old driver who's not on the electoral register? Would that be applicable? What would happen in that case?
So it is the electoral register that we would be using, but you certainly by 2029 we're going to have 16-year-olds that can vote. Well, but yeah, but they can obviously use the kiosks and things like that, and I would hope that parents are going to take their children out and well, young people down to the beach to enjoy those. But obviously you can join the electoral roll at 17 in anticipation of your 18th birthday. And the other one was starting it next year. Obviously, once we've gone through the cabinet process, it will be a case of getting it up and running as soon as we reasonably can. What we did on obviously that release was try and make it a reasonable timescale. Obviously, if it's ready, we will go live, and that's how that would work.
And just about, because part of the research identified that that's where we have the most pressure in terms of visitors to the conurbation, so therefore that's when residents should get the most benefit in terms over the summer. The report mentions that we undertook a procurement earlier this year in January, which was unsuccessful, and so we would have ideally have launched it this year, and then had a summer and a winter. But our feedback is actually that's when visitors come in most, and that's when residents tend to find it's more difficult to get those benefits.
Thank you. Councillor Beasley, you were next.
Well, thank you, Chair. I have a number of concerns about this, but first of all, there are a number of financial issues which I don't think are at all clear within this paper. I would normally have expected to have seen some kind of income and expenditure projections, which would give you scenarios which would in turn lead to a best and a worst outcome financially. I don't see any of that here. What I do see are figures that have been put forward which do not seem to satisfy the normal financial mechanisms of a council. So forgive me if I've got this wrong, but I think what it's telling us is that there's a set-up charge of close on £200,000, half of which is financed by the Shared Prosperity Fund in year one, but it doesn't talk about what other costs there might be of modifying that, updating it and all the rest of it, and there will be costs, but we don't have any idea of what sort of scale those might be. So that's actually setting the mechanism up. There isn't a lot of detail about what that includes, so it's hard to evaluate. It then talks about an income loss forecast to a maximum of £320,000. I'm assuming that is per annum, and within there, Cabinet have approved £500,000 of reserves to be earmarked as contingency. That's quite an interesting juxtaposition between the estimated cost for income loss against a contingency that's greater than that. I would think it very rare that I've ever seen that before. What it doesn't do is to talk about after year one. So it's all very well raiding a reserve for £500,000 in year one, and just because you have an underspend and you put it into reserves doesn't mean it's any less of part of the reserves as a result. So you are using reserves to do that in year one. What happens after that? Because the projections simply aren't here to give us any idea about how that will be resourced in the future. It doesn't tell us anything about estimated numbers of take-up, which means there's a major section of this in the financials that's completely missing. And again, it's extremely difficult to have any grip on whether this works financially. But at a time when finance within this local authority is so very tight, I accept what the portfolio holder says about giving back to residents. Well, giving back and taking away, it seems to me, taking away the air festival cost less than the cost provision for this already. So in taking that away, giving something back which may or may not be of appeal to residents is a completely different issue. And although the summary of the financial implications are in here, I'm surprised not to see Director of Finance actually setting out his stall to be supportive of the continuity of this. All very well setting something up. Very easy to set something up, may or may not work, may or may not be taken up. But whether it is or not, the finances going forward are what matters, because presumably this is looking at it as a permanent facility for residents. And if that is the case, then there will be other implications coming out of that for the future. That's just how budgets should be measured and should be delivered. So at the heart of all of this is the technical part of value for money. That's what the external auditors look at. A section called value for money, and their analysis of that will be around some of these features, I am sure. And so for me, the way this has been put together doesn't seem to be as well thought through as it must be, but it's also about what's being offered within it, because we don't know whether that is likely to be taken up in terms of the three items that have been mentioned. And I accept that you're talking about a number of others. However, those aren't actually here for us to consider tonight. Those that are here to be considered, I think, do need quite a lot of extra thought, frankly. The leisure ones, if it excludes BH Live, that takes away a major chunk of leisure, but most particularly swimming throughout the conurbation. It's notwithstanding the fact that they are very competitive. They will have offers of their own. They may well introduce further offers of their own to compete with this. I'm pretty sure they will. As far as the others are concerned, well, the car parking, there's been a bit of a debate about that, and I think for many people it will be neither here nor there, frankly. But the third part is discounts on council-owned catering facilities at 10%. That won't get them flocking in. I am pretty sure about that. It's a business in which I've spent most of my life. I understand how it works. So I don't think that is an attractive enough offer, frankly. So therefore, if we don't know the numbers coming in and how many times £10 a card we're going to get, I just cannot equate the finances. There are a number of other issues, but I would very much like, Chair, some answers to those. And if the answers aren't there, then fine, please say so, or please say we'll come back with them when they are. I don't want this to be a guessing game. And I think finally, Chair, there are quite a number of typographical errors within the body of the report, and those really should be corrected, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. Councillor Herrick, would you like to come back?
Thank you for the questions. There is quite a lot of detailed financial modelling which sits behind this report, and that has been rigorously tested by Director of Finance and senior leadership. So it's gone through various iterations in terms of both the offer and what we can afford is particularly a key parameter. There was a question I think Councillor Beasley asked in relation to the 200,000. That setup cost, so whilst we didn't have a successful procurement, we had responses from technology providers which was able to inform us in terms of what the cost of this looks like, and therefore that is based on feedback from the market. The funding, as you would have seen in the report, is funded from grant, and therefore that's not putting pressure on the council budgets. The question in terms of 320,000, it's based on take up around 5% to 25%, which again is reflecting the feedback we've had from other local authority areas. So all the modelling has been looked at both from a worst case scenario to a best case scenario, which is 25% is what we believe to be the take up if the card is rolled out. So the financial assumptions which are shown in the table are the cost implications of that income. What we haven't got is obviously the revenue generation that might be generated from doing more. So when you add 10%, that would hopefully encourage more people to buy. So we've also done modelling in terms of what does the uptake look like and how much additional income does that generate. So in terms of other avenues to fund any gap that might be created, there's a charge that we've talked about, and that's particularly focused on the ongoing running costs and the implementation costs, and that's why we're looking at between £5 and £10. There's the additional income that we've modelled in terms of the additional 10% and income that could generate, and then there's a wider piece around there might be more grant available to deliver a scheme like this. So there's quite robust scenarios that have tested value for money, and coming back to all the offers that we've looked at, there were some offers which would have been worse than the offers which have been put forward, and that again I think has struck that balance in terms of our initial offer.
Thank you. Councillor Beasley, has that addressed your points to the most part?
Well,
your questions,
it gives
rather.
me an answer, but I'm afraid for the purposes of the Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting, we are here to see whether or not we support the recommendations. And the recommendations ask us to make those on the basis that we understand the big picture. And I don't think we've got the big picture here, certainly on the financials. And I would never put my name to anything financial within the council unless I had been able to look through those in the greatest of detail. So the questions I've been asking are just fundamental. I've got plenty of others that would stand behind that. And frankly, for Overview and Scrutiny Board to be asked to look at this paper, to spend time on this work, but not to be provided with the detailed financial information is not acceptable. It simply isn't acceptable. And I've seen many reports over the years. I would never have let this report go out, frankly, to Overview and Scrutiny, and I certainly would have wanted to make sure that I had looked at it in a sense that didn't solicit the sort of questions that have been tonight, because I think as a council we should be better than that.
Thank
so
you.
those questions that we've heard around the room tonight are to a large extent predictable, and they haven't been thought through, in my opinion, because if they had, it would have been part of what was set out in front of us tonight. And it's evidenced to me by the sloppy way, I'm afraid I have to say, in which this report has come to us. It's full of typos, which is, again, not acceptable. We need to do better than this, Chair. And it's for this Overview and Scrutiny Board to hold officers and portfolio holders to account, to ensure that that is what we do as a council.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Beasley. I do share some of your concerns, but rest assured, I'm not dismissing them. I just wanted to make sure that questions you had specifically had been addressed. Because we have a couple more people who want to come in. Councillor Tarling, next.
Thank you very much. I'll try and keep it. My first reading of it, I completely support the need for a residence card. When I was going around with Councillor Cox knocking on doors in our election and also in by-elections, it was a key tenet of our policies, and it widely seemed to be a popular thing on the doorstep. So, you know, I'm 100% behind it. My first comment when I saw the lane swimming, I went like, are you going to put a new lane in Christchurch swimming pool? Because I don't want them in my lane. I have to declare an interest. I'm a member at BCP Leisure, and I do some lane swimming. Unfortunately, I don't go to the gym as much as I should do, but I'm happy to extend an offer to help Councillor Canavan with his swimming. I've taught adults to swim, and it's a real shame that you don't make the best of the best asset we have here, which is our beautiful seafront and swimming. So I'm more than happy to. Yeah, I haven't lost anybody yet. However, on the serious side now, Councillor Beasley has made a fantastic point and driven home the whole purpose of Overview and Scrutiny. And much as it pains me to agree with him, the level of scrutiny we're now applying to the closure of future places indicates, you know, the level of work that we have to do when things don't go right. And I feel this is a Dragon's Den moment here, but you have to come to us with the figures. And if I was writing in my book and writing the figures down, I'd want to know exactly what the predictions are for the take-ups. Some of the questions I had were about the staffing costs. How many staff do you envisage taking on for it? there's some real details that need resolving regarding the parking. I'm confused. I thought I understood the 1 hour free parking until Councillor Wright asked a few questions. Oh, I haven't quite got it right. I take on board what Councillor Trent says about the using the app. There's things to be negotiated with Ringo on that, and that needs to be resolved. I have some details also looking at the Christchurch car parks. There's a lot of Christchurch car parks in there that are going to have this discount by proportion to our residents. We've got a larger number of car parks there, and some of those actually have very different uses. The Priory car park is very much for visitors and sort of holiday makers, and most residents wouldn't park in the Priory unless they are either going to church on Sunday or going to the 1 or 2 establishments down that end of town. So I would say we need another looking at the parking strategy, which car parks it applies to. But yeah, I do. I've actually Councillor Beasley, I think, has really shone quite a strong light on this, and this whole project has to wash its own face. I'm very much in favour of it, but the financial parameters to tell us that the work has been done and it's all behind the scenes smacks very heavily of the future places discussions, and it gives me a bit of a cold sweat at the moment. They need to be seen, these figures, and what we base this on, not just to see the words, and I'm not worried about a typo. It's not the biggest issue here, but yeah, if you're going to a bank and trying to sell this, you want to see exactly what the outgoings are and exactly what the expected revenues are of this scheme, laid out in a proper table, and that's not in here. So I see Councillor Aikenhead also wants to speak, and I appreciate I've been left to the end, but I would make a proposal here that we ask for this to come back with a detailed financial analysis and a proper business case back to this committee, and it's presented on that. I mean, there's definitely some little points that need to be sorted out here. Barrel bikes, buses, and they can be answered. Those questions can be answered and say we've approached more bus. Because we're doing the BCP discount thing, it's not available at this time. There's the private sector as well. Are there restaurants? Some people have got gourmet cards and stuff like that. It could be used for that as well. But there is a lot of spin-off here. It is a fantastic opportunity for BCP to not just follow other councils, but to be leading other councils. We've got a great offer here as a 3 towns. And the whole commercial thing could be hinged on this, but I want to see that it's going to be properly staffed. Information's a big thing. Comms. How much are we spending on comms for this? How much are we going to spend on the web page for this, where people can log on and check what have I used my card for this day? Have I been to Christchurch parking? Have I parked at Poole Quay or what have you? And what savings have I made? When I look at my Starbucks app, it tells me I've done all this. I've drunk all this coffee, and I need to probably not drink, or maybe have a decaf once in a while. It's that sort of information that is really useful with these type of cards, but I just don't think it's there yet. So yeah, I am going to propose that. I think we need a more detailed business case. I'm happy to work with the portfolio holder on that, and perhaps give a structure to a report which would satisfy Councillor Beasley's concerns. But yeah, I'd agree with some of the comments here. There's too many bits that aren't quite right here at the moment, and the key one is a proper cost benefit analysis of this, and I don't see it in this report.
Thank you, Councillor Tarling. I note your proposal. I'm going to put it just on hold for a moment. I'm going to see if Councillor Herritt or Amina or Glyn would like to say anything in response to the comments you've just made, first of all, but I haven't forgotten that you've put that forward.
I think it might be worthwhile circulating the previous presentation that we did for ONS Working Group, which set out some of the staff costs and some of the detail which sat behind the proposal which we'd looked at. So At the moment, all the staff costs are within our existing budgets, so it's been absorbed within my directorate. We've got percentage then from me, from the comms team, from the project management team and the program management team. So all the costs are currently within our existing budgets. I recognise the point you're making about that you haven't got a table here that sets all those costs out, but the 193,000 is essentially amalgamation of all those costs across the council and also then the supplier. There is a business case that sits behind this. Again, I think that's what we took to the working group, which set out those costs. So it might be that we need to circulate that because that's got more detail in terms of those costings and what made up the original budgets.
Oh, okay. Briefly, Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, I'm glad that the work's been done, because then it's going to be quite easy to show it to us. But one of the criticisms Councillor Beasley mentioned at the Air Festival is when we tried to work out how much the Air Festival cost, we were looking at a lot of BCP embedded staff, and when you trying to extract that from different budgets, it's almost impossible. So I want to see, and I don't know, other councils may have the same opinion, that it's created as a discrete project, and those costs aren't saying, oh, we're going to get so and so and so and so. So it wants to be quite clear that we're not borrowing, half a day from this comms person, somebody from customer services, and so on and so, that you've got FTE people written down on the organogram. You're going to staff this. There's going to be 20 people on customer services dealing with inquiries. You've got you've got so many FTEs on the website. You've got so many people on the other side, and then the external suppliers as well, what their resources are going to be, and see it properly resourced. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tarling.
So we won't, I think that is a level of detail that we won't, because we won't know what the take-up is. There is a proposal to have this role embedded within I&D going forward. So that will be a dedicated person and team rather than apportionments of people's time. I think it's fair to say in terms of the report, we are looking to then appoint a supplier. So as part of that conversation, the supplier will be telling us what they believe will be the resource requirement. We've also worked through what the different costs might be. So there's two parts. There's the supplier can do everything and the council doesn't need to do much. It might host it, or there's elements of it that the council takes forward and it sits less with the supplier. So those are the options we need to work through with the supply, but we've costed it based on the feedback that we've had today in terms of what we think that will look like. But yes, in answer to the previous question, I think the previous item, the proposal is that it will sit within investment development as a dedicated resource. And the setup costs is that charge that we've said will be between £5 and £10. And partly why we're saying that is because we need to know what the take-up is in order to work out what we think it will cost us to maintain and run it. There may be a huge take-up and there might be a very small take-up, which then changes the resource requirement.
I mean, I think conflating the risk here with future places is like a chasm in terms of they're poles apart in terms of the risk, the amount of money involved. But I also think this was very much about the offer. We realise there's some detail that's probably come through this board in a different method rather than at this point that perhaps we should have shared before. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure those things were clear.
So I have Councillor Aikenhead waiting to speak. I also would like to say a few things as well. So I'm going to take Councillor Aikenhead and then I'm going to put some thoughts forward.
Yes, hello. So actually, I first put my hand up because there are a couple more points that I thought of. Now I understand what the parking offer is, because I did misunderstand it when I read the report. But before I talk about those, I just like to say that the proposal that Councillor Tarling is putting forward, I think that's I don't think it's so controversial as it sounds, because Councillor Herrett already said in response to me that he was happy for it to come back at least to the portfolio holder, possibly to the cabinet. And if what we recommend as a board is that this, instead of being delegated, comes back to cabinet, then we as a board can also consider it as well. And I don't think it's just the finances. There's other details that, as I said at the beginning, that it would be really sensible for us to consider, and I think it would be a very sensible option for this committee to amend that second point that says delegate it to the officers to instead say to come back to Cabinet and for it to also come back to this committee. So that's just what I think about the proposal, as long as that is, because I don't think we can just ask for it to come back here. I think we have to, I think we have to recommend the Cabinet ask. I'm not sure, can take advice on that. But so I had a couple of comments I wanted to make about the parking proposal that are some just some concerns that came into my mind, that if when you do go forward to looking at it, just to make sure these things are covered. First of all, I was just thinking that if it's buy 2 hours get one free at the end, um uh, just to make sure that that people are going to get some confirmation on their phone as to whether or not they have got that free hour of parking, um and as to whether the residence card has successfully worked and given that to them, because we wouldn't want the situation where people are staying out for 3 hours and coming back to find they have a parking ticket because for some reason it hasn't worked or it's failed. So they can actually check it's worked. That's a good thing. And also, when we're putting out our marketing materials about this, providing we do sort it all out and it goes forward, to make sure that we are absolutely clear what it is that we are offering, because if we write it and say you will get a free hour of parking, people will turn up and park and expect not to pay, because they've got a residence card, and they'll say, well, I had a residence card. So I think it's very, very important that we are much clearer in the way that we describe the buy 2 hours get one free, which is a better way to describe it, if that is what we are offering, so that people are not confused and end up with a parking ticket.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aikenhead.
And I think we can
Councillor
consider both those points as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so those points have been taken on. Okay, so Councillor Aikenhead, you also addressed the proposal and made some comments about what that should look like. If I may just give some thoughts of my own and to add to what's been said already this evening before we move towards looking at that proposal. I'm not going to repeat things that other people have said, but I do want to make it clear where I feel similarly to others. I have to say my first reaction was that the optics of this offer look as though it is a benefit for drivers. We are a council that has declared a climate emergency. We are currently consulting on LTP4, which is overtly seeks modal shift, if you'll forgive the jargon, from the former transport professional, away from the private car. And I understand we've talked over why we have control over parking in our own car parks. I get that. In a way that we don't have control over bus tickets or barrel rentals or anything else. But I think Sue said it quite well earlier, the optics, the politics of it do matter. And I am very worried about an offer that seems to say, here's something for you drivers and nothing for anybody else. When we're also, in the same breath, constantly trying to tell people that we want them to choose different modes, to reduce congestion, to tackle air pollution, to encourage healthy living and all of those other things. So I have some really grave concerns about that. It's also been touched on that the swim offer is only in BCP leisure centres, and as a Bournemouth councillor I have to point out that none of those are in Bournemouth. Doesn't feel very fair to the people of Bournemouth. So I think there could be some worries about that too. And I also, it's been touched on by others, but the other thing that really I'm very keen that we should try and get right is making this offer so what am I trying to say? So looking at a reduced or zero cost to certain groups based on income, because again, otherwise I think we risk this being something that those who can afford it get something extra, and those who can't get nothing. And that's not something I'd want to support at all. So those were my main concerns, and they have all been kind of touched on previously. I really strongly agree with the comments that have been made that more detail on the financial modelling would have been helpful. Now, I appreciate that we have had some background through ONS to this, through our working group. But this is a cabinet report going through for a decision, and I think that detail needs to be in it, and it's not. So, I mean, there may be an opportunity to add some detail to this report before it goes to cabinet, so that that's at least more transparent. That clear. You mentioned how there's been a lot of financial modelling done, but we haven't actually seen that laid out in this, where we're being asked to support or otherwise a recommendation. We haven't actually seen that laid out in front of us, and I think that is quite important that is done. So yes, to move to the proposals proposals that have been put forward, I think Councillor Tarling, you were initially suggesting that an extra layer of decision making be added in, so something around portfolio holder having another look at it. That's correct. If I'm wrong, then go ahead. If it needs saying differently.
That's fine. Rather than leave you struggling, I'll try and remember what I said. It was the fact that we need to see the financial parameters that informed this and a cost-benefit analysis, and that this is brought back again, and it could be post-cabinet. Could I, one little codicil to that, this has to be agreed by full council at some point?
So thank you, Councillor Tarling. Forgive me, I'm not trying to cut you off, but I think I'd like at this point to get some support with what process could look like, other than what's in front of us, which is straightforwardly ONS says whether it supports or otherwise these recommendations, or suggests a different recommendation, then it goes to cabinet and then it's done with. People are suggesting some changes to that process, potentially involving it coming back to cabinet for a second time, and I think we need some clarification on whether that's process-wise even viable. Councillor Herriott.
Can I just make an offer to add an appendage before it goes to cabinet next week, so that obviously people can come to cabinet and make comments on the financial detail that sits behind it, and obviously put it back to the portfolio holder, so you've at least got some accountability, and you can hold me in front of you if you're not satisfied, I suppose.
Okay, I'd still like some advice if that's all right. So people seem to be suggesting they want to have another go at scrutinising this. Robin, any advice you can give us on how that could be achieved?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's important to clarify what it is you're seeking. You're entitled to have this, try and have this call back to you. I'm not really fully understanding what it is you're asking. So whether it's a report back that says, no, we don't agree, and we're making these recommendations and we leave you to it, or is the impetus on coming back somehow to get this re-scrutinised with you?
I think my understanding from what the board has said is that they don't feel they have enough information to make an informed decision about whether they can support the offer. But this is going to cabinet in just over a week's time. So it has to go through that process. I think what I'm asking is, how could this come back around to scrutiny before final decisions were made, given that we're being asked to decide on a recommendation that this goes ahead with no further input from committees at the moment. Does that make sense?
So you're not agreeing. So if you're not agreeing, you can make that statement back to cabinet and say you don't agree with what you're being invited to agree to, with recommendations and an invitation to bring it back. That's for cabinet to then consider as part of its debating process.
Okay, thank you. So the proposal on the table is that we don't support the recommendation, and the reason is the lack of detail in the financials, and the lack of certainty over some of those other areas that we've mentioned as well. And that our recommendation would be that further work is done and the report is delayed and further work is done and brought back to Cabinet at a later date. Does that cover what the board want to see?
Does it have to go to Cabinet? That can it be postponed and give time for officers to do, to add in the financials, add in the detail of some of the things we've been talking about, like the difference in the parking and things like that?
Robin?
You can invite Cabinet to come back and report back to you and to give an indication what it wants to say about what you're raising as issues. Ultimately, it doesn't necessarily have to follow all of those. It'll make its own decision, but you can make a persuasive invitation to them on the grounds you set out. Perhaps it might also be as a compromise that maybe the portfolio holder needs to fully understand exactly what it is. It's difficult because I know you're saying it's just a general disharmony. You don't like what it is you're hearing and you need some more detail, but is it something specific the portfolio could help you with, or is this more of an issue saying no, we don't agree?
More specific.
Chair, there is Chair. Can
Yes.
I come in?
Yes.
Chair, I believe that we can ask Cabinet to, instead of, we can say we disagree with recommendation 2 out of 2 recommendations, and say that instead of having it delegated to officers, we can ask the Cabinet to bring it back to Cabinet for a final decision after more work has been done.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aiken. I think we're getting a bit tangled here because Councillor Wright's question was slightly different, which was could it just not go to Cabinet and be postponed to a later date? And now we're talking about it going through Cabinet to come back around to Cabinet. So we're getting a bit muddled.
What does the officer say?
Well,
surely,
okay.
Can we not have advice on it?
Yep, that's what I'm trying to do. Lindsay wants to come in.
Yeah,
Give me a chance.
just to say that you can say whatever you want to Cabinet, and I would make clear the specific points as much as you can in your recommendation. But of course, they receive that recommendation next week and they can choose to do what they want with it and go ahead and make their decision on it, at which point your opportunity to scrutinise it again pre-decision has gone. So I think the portfolio holder has listened and offered to provide an extra appendix. So I think you just need to make really clear what you would want to see accompanying that report, and then ultimately Cabinet will do what it wants to with your recommendation. You can, of course, after the event, ask for some more scrutiny on it, but it's less impact after the decision.
Just to assist, it may be helpful just to get it from Amelia as the officer responsible that timescale may fit, or she could do that for you if that's a positive indication. That may well be a compromise that committee want to consider.
We have all the work, so it's just about putting it all together into a format that is present. And actually, I think we've at one point had it in the report, so we can certainly bring that back in time.
Thank you. Okay, I've seen a couple of people indicating Councillor Canavan, Councillor Beasley and Councillor Tarling. Can I ask you to keep this focused on the thing we're trying to do here, which is to formulate our recommendations, please?
Yes, that's what I was attempting to try and do. So, Councillor Wright's point, I think it's too late to bump the Cabinet paper. I think this will be effectively the Cabinet paper, and irrespective of whether an additional appendix is added or not, I still think there's a requirement for this to have the additional scrutiny that several people have already talked about. So, in my mind, the way to do that is to amend this recommendation, that rather than delegating it, we ask Cabinet to refer it back to overview and scrutiny in order for us to achieve the additional detail to allow us to do the scrutiny work before that final decision is taken. The only other alternative I can see it is to get Cabinet to agree that that will be done before anything is implemented. I think that's a bit trickier because we will never really know. So I would favour changing the recommendation that rather than delegating it, that we actually ask Cabinet to refer it back.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Canavan. Councillor Beasley.
Well, the options are very limited, Chair, and I would have been surprised and extremely concerned that if Cabinet received this paper at Cabinet meeting and then followed the recommendations, that would go through, because they wouldn't have been asking the right questions. So it raises a very fundamental point about governance, and there's certainly, I think, a role for audit and governance if they're not careful in this decision-making process. And I speak with a little bit of experience of Cabinet reports over the years, and I think this is, I'm sorry, I just think it's a very, very poorly thought out paper. If this is what Cabinet are going to be making their decision on, they shouldn't be making it on this. So unless we are able to add value to the process to make sure they deal with it in the proper way, I would then support what Councillor Canavan is saying. If we can't achieve that, then we should reject it here and now. And I say that because we've had assurances on the financials, but we've had no evidence. So we haven't actually seen a cost-benefit analysis that Councillor Tarling referred to a moment ago. We haven't heard any, and I set it up in what I said earlier in order that I was hoping I would hear the magic words of a sensitivity analysis. I gave it to officers, the opportunity to do that. I didn't hear it. From that, I take it one has not been prepared. And if there's no sensitivity analysis around something that is so uncertain, this should not be going through Cabinet. If I'm wrong in that, perhaps the officers could circulate the sensitivity analysis to us in the morning. So then we'll know it exists. But it's evidence like that, without which Cabinet cannot make a decision. They really must not make a decision unless they've got that. And the future funding of this is absolutely critical at a time when we will be reviewing budgets, reducing budgets, and taking budgets away in the future, I am sure. And this is part and parcel of making sure that that process is robust.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. Yes, I think that from what I'm hearing from the board, we are all on the same page about this, that there is a need for a significant amount more detail of the financials behind this. And I think what we're trying to work towards is the precise recommendation that we put forward. Councillor Tarling, did you want to add to that specifically?
Yeah, you know, every time I open my mouth sometimes in these OSB meetings, I feel I was going down a wormhole, but I think we're getting to the nub of it, and Councillor Canavan, I think, has hit it pretty close to the bullseye now. I think that we recommend that that Cabinet seek this additional information, as in full cost benefit analysis, a sensitivity analysis as well is worth doing, or bias analysis. Is it sensitivity or bias? Yeah. I can't remember. Sensitivity. Well, yeah, I think I get confused which is which, but they seek the information and then it comes back to this committee for further further review.
I would like to ask Lindsay to just clarify that that's something we could do in terms of process. What the board would like to do is recommend that the more detail is included, significantly more detail included in the report, particularly around how it stacks up financially, and the risks and the different scenarios that have been tested and we've been told have been modelled, and that Cabinet requests that to come back, and then it comes back through the committee system again before going to Cabinet for sign off. Am I making any sense at this point?
That makes sense. So what you're saying is that you want to ask for additional information and ask for deferral of the decision by Cabinet to allow for that to come back through overview and scrutiny before it goes on to Cabinet for its final decision. Yes, you can ask that, yes, but you can't compel it. No. So, yes.
Okay. Is everyone content that would be our... Yes, Councillor Beasley. I did say Councillor Butts had her hand up for quite some time, and she put it up the moment I said that I would be the last person to ask questions on the paper, I'm afraid because Councillor Butt isn't on the board, I don't intend taking any further questions.
Chair, there's no need to direct that to me. I was only trying to discreetly indicate to you so you didn't miss it.
All right.
I was only trying to help.
And I'm now making it clear.
Please don't take it out on me.
Councillor Butt,
Madam
I'm
Chairman,
sorry,
may
no, I
comment on-
I haven't called on you to speak. Councillor Butt, I haven't called on you to speak. No.
May I comment on your statement? You are excluding an
Councillor-
elected member who has the absolute right to attend a meeting and speak on behalf of her residents, and that is disgraceful. I've listened carefully to the debate. I came in last because I didn't want to
Thank you. Okay, so we have, I think we have a recommendation that we wish to vote on at this point, which is...
We do need to clarify the wording.
We are going to clarify the wording.
The ONS board did not support the recommendation as the board did not feel that the cabinet report had sufficient financial details and overall details of the scheme offers to enable it to make an informed decision, and recommend that the report is deferred and further work be undertaken on the financial details, including a value for money analysis and a sensitivity analysis, which is then brought back to the ONS board before being taken to cabinet for decision.
Sorry, not value for money, cost benefit analysis.
Okay. Thank you.
Slightly different to
Thank you.
Okay. Cost benefit.
Okay.
Other than that phrase, did that sound like it captured what the board was trying to say?
I am seeing agreement, I think, no disagreement. Yeah. Okay. So are we happy we know what we are going to go to a vote on in terms of our recommendation to Cabinet at this point? Yes? In which case...
Yeah.
Yes, can I have a proposer? And a seconder. So I have Councillor Tarling proposal and Councillor Rice seconding. Okay, may I see all those in favour of this recommendation?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in favour.
And any against? And I think that's everybody accounted for, isn't it? Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. That was, we got tangled, but we got there. I think that we have, I think we'll try and plough on to for the last couple of items. We've got the yeah, we shouldn't take too much longer on the last couple of items, so we'll keep on going. Thank you very much, Councillor Herritt, and thank you, Amina, for all your time this evening, and give you a chance to leave. So moving on then to item 8, we have the a new tool here, which is the ONS Board Recommendation Tracker. I'm going to invite Lindsay to introduce the tracker and outline how it can be used by us going forward to monitor the impact of our recommendations.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, just a very swift introduction, as this is a new tool that will be rolled out to all ONS committees. We're doing this, we've worked it along with the ONS chairs through, continuous improvement to make things better across ONS, and very much feel that we could strengthen how we monitor the impact of your recommendations at overview and scrutiny committees and where they go to after you've made them, because of course the action on your recommendations doesn't magically stop when you've made them. There's a journey for them to either be accepted or not accepted by Cabinet or the decision maker that you refer them to, and then of course they need to be implemented. So this tracker captures all the decisions that you have made over the previous full municipal year. It gives you an audit trail of where they've come from and where they're going, a RAG rating of broadly whether they've been accepted, rejected or partially accepted. And then the final column gives implementation updates. Now, the sort of nub of the value of this tracker is in that final column. And the proposal to you, and it's for you to do what you want with this, but the proposal is that you would have it on each of your agendas as a reference tool, but that perhaps quarterly you invite people in to give you updates on specific recommendations, particularly those that you feel are perhaps going through a bit of a journey to be implemented and you want to hear more detail. And a key element of ONS being able to have value is keeping an eye on where your recommendations have gone. Have they been implemented? Can you have some conversations and strengthen that implementation journey? Are there any barriers that you can help work through with decision makers? So this is just about giving you a tool to help you do that, and how you want to use it is up to you. But I certainly wouldn't recommend that you go through it line by line every meeting. I also I want to be clear that there isn't resource for officers to seek implementation updates for every recommendation between meetings. I think it should be used as a tool for you to invite relevant people in every so often and get those verbal updates. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does anyone have any questions about the tracker? Councillor Tarling.
I think it's very good. I think it's a fantastic piece of work. I think too often we, as councillors, we sit in these committee meetings and we say something and then we forget what it is we've agreed to and to keep track on it. I think it's a brilliant idea. I think hopefully it's rolled out over all committees. That'd be brilliant.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think it's really useful, having had an initial look through it, and will be really useful going forward. And I support the suggestion of a quarterly review, potentially to bring people in to update. And Councillor Canavan, you want to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I'm just wondering whether it would be possible to put all of the different scrutiny reports together so that they're all together in a single place, rather than having this document for the board, another document for environmental place, another document for health and life and social care. Would it be? I'm just asking whether it would be possible to have them all neatly in one place, because my brain gets scrambled.
Now that you're on two of them. Lindsay, does that sound like something you could explore?
Yeah, certainly. It's more about what's usable and what isn't. We don't want it to be too unwieldy for you, but perhaps we could gather them all in one place that we can identify for you.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Yes, Chair, I was going to say I agree with that idea, actually, because there are so many things that are cross-cutting, and to actually know what other scrutiny boards are looking at and what they're recommending as actions, I think is quite useful, because I know we're all in individual silos, but everything that we do crosses over with other scrutiny panels and boards, and I think that would be a useful addition.
Yeah, I can certainly see the benefit of being able to see, all of us being able to see each committee's recommendations. I think my worry would be about picking out, the bits, as chair of the board, picking out the board's bits and not worrying too much about the other bits when I needed to. So, but I'll leave that in Lindsay's very capable hands to figure out
Could I suggest
some way of making that work.
You have it in sections, so each board has a section, so that you can go to the appropriate section, but you can cross-refer to other sections if need be.
Yeah, good ideas. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant.
Sorry, Lindsay, we're just giving you a load more work, haven't we?
So I just wanted to make a couple of comments on the tracker, very briefly. Under the recommendations from our meeting in May this year, item 11, we have that's marked as a blue, which I think is awaiting a response, isn't it? And it's mentioned that there's no deadline. We didn't put a deadline on that. But given that this blue badge is, we are going to come on to that, to touch on that briefly in the work plan. So I think we could we could revisit that in the next item briefly. And I think we just need to put a date on that, don't we, in terms of asking the portfolio holder to respond, a reasonable date. So we'll do that. The other item, the other one I wanted to just mention was outstanding actions at the very bottom of the tracker from the July meeting. Just to mention that the consultation working group has been reopened and that's work ongoing. So there's just a brief update on that from the agenda. Yes, go ahead, Lindsay.
Sorry, I neglected to say that previously you had an action sheet that was on your agenda with your minutes. This replaces that. So you've got recommendations being tracked, and then at the very end, any other actions that you've agreed, as you can see at the end of the document, are on there.
Yeah, thank you. So is everybody content with that decision tracker and understand what that's going to look like? Great. I think we'll move on then to the final item on our agenda, which is the work plan. So you have an updated work plan that was circulated with the agenda. There is a couple of things to note that have been added. The first of which is a recommendation from the Audit and Governance Committee. I think Lindsay was going to just briefly outline that for us as well.
Yeah, just to expand on what this is, this arose at a meeting of Audit and Governance on the 24th of July. There was a report and discussion around Carter's Quay, and in that the committee members were concerned that there should be some attention to residents living in that area and the impact on them, in effect living next to a building site, and so they made this recommendation into you, which is that the impact of the current situation at Carter's Quay on local residents living next to the site and any potential remedies be referred to the Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee for consideration. That was later changed to the ONS board because it was established that that was the wrong remit that they recommended it into. So this is brought to you just like any other work programme item request for you to consider whether you want to include it or not. Just to help you in that, you do have on your work plan for December a Carter's Quay cabinet report, so for pre-cabinet scrutiny. So I don't know whether there's any element of looking at that through that lens as well, or including that within that discussion that you might want to consider timetabling.
So does anyone have any thoughts on that, as Lindsay's just outlined? Anybody? Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to raise this item anyway, but in a slightly different context, in so much as the Audit and Governance Committee is looking at Carter's Quay, and a report is being prepared, which may result in it being effectively an investigation into the history and all the rest of it. And I didn't quite understand the context that Lindsay's just described as being what I saw on the screen at item 2 for the meeting on the 8th of December. Are we talking about the same thing, Chair? Or in fact, am I right to be raising this? Because I do want to make sure that A&G aren't doing one thing over there and ONS are doing something else over here in isolation, not realising the work that's going on elsewhere, in both cases actually. So I don't know whether that's something to be answered now, or maybe it's something just to be thought about after tonight.
Yeah, I think I'm certainly aware of the work that Audit and Governance Committee are doing around Carter's Quay, and my understanding, although I haven't read the committee stuff in full from that this recommendation is related to, is that that's slightly coming out of that bit of work and asking us to take a slightly different angle and look at and rather than going back into the history, looking at the current situation with our residents' lens, which is the board's remit. I think it would make sense to link that to the Carter's Quay pre-cabinet report that we're having in December, so we can take that away and have a discussion about how best we do that and fit that into the agenda if people are happy for us to do that. Yeah, okay, yeah, lovely. The other item which has come up and isn't on the agenda, is that members will have seen a number of emails in the last few days about blue badges and a request for an urgent review by the ONS board of this current situation around blue badges, which Councillor Bartlett, he's requested a councillor call for action, which is a particular mechanism within the constitution that I'd never heard of until I saw that email, and I believe hasn't been invoked in the history of BCP council. So where we've got to with that is that as blue badges is already something that's on our work plan, we felt that the call for action there's a certain amount of process and procedure that needs to be gone through for that to get the relevant information together to have the officers produce a report for the board to consider, and that given that this is already in our work plan, it probably won't save any time to go down that route, but that if the board was happy to, we could find space, given that Councillor Bart's made it very clear he feels it's quite urgent that we review the current situation with blue badges, we could find some space on as soon as possible on an agenda to review what's going on with blue badges as part of our work plan. It's already in there to keep a watching brief on it, and we've been alerted to a concern, and therefore moving it as close to it to now as we can in our agenda, but not confirming exactly when that would be until we've gone away and thought about how it fits with other items that are coming forward over the next couple of meetings. Does that sound an acceptable approach? Councillor Trent and then Councillor Canavan.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think the problem with blue badges is every time we think we know what's going on, something goes wrong. And I remember last year advising a resident that, it was taking 9 weeks, I think, at the time to process, but one person was off long-term sick, and that suddenly became 13 weeks plus. And we did make some recommendations about sort of people working across units to make sure that they're always being sort of processed. And I got the impression that there was an issue that had cropped up that involved that not happening. But it is useful to, at the very least, be briefed on it, because we did make some quite clear recommendations. And, it seemed to get better, and then something goes wrong and it sort of, falls apart again. So I think a refresher of what we've actually recommended in the past would be useful when it's next looked at, and then see whether things are actually being followed, because I do think that, we made some useful recommendations and it does seem to sort of improve it, but it's not a consistent improvement, it seems. So I think actually a regular update would be the very least that we could have. And then if there's something that's quite obviously going wrong within that, then we can sort of tackle that as a specific issue.
Yeah, well, we have it on the work plan as certainly a keep under review item, and I think we had said within a year, and the last time we looked at it was actually May, so we're bringing that forward by at least 6 months. But I think given the concern that's been raised, I personally would be perfectly happy for us to do that. Councillor Canavan.
Yeah, no, I was only going to support that, Chair, and quite happy to leave it to yourself, working with officers, just to simply find the first available opportunity that we can to raise it, obviously as soon as possible, but bearing in mind the amount of work the committee's still got to look at. I think that's fine. Yeah. I think the point that Councillor Trent has raised is absolutely right. I was going to describe it as lumpy, and I had always understood the object of the exercise was to even out those lumps, but we don't seem to quite have achieved that yet. So,
and then, sorry.
Yeah, whenever we can, really.
Great, and I think what will constrain that is allowing officers enough time to gather the information together to give us something to actually look at and make a decision on. And also, I'm not proposing we add it to next week's agenda. I think we've got enough to do next week. But beyond that, we will do our best. And while we're on that, just because I referenced it on the previous item, that there is that outstanding response awaited from the portfolio holder around blue badges. So we will just fold that in to this and make sure we get an outcome to that as part of the same process. It would be my suggestion.
I will say, Chair, I thought it was very useful of the portfolio holder to update us. I think that is a very useful thing to be doing.
Yes, agreed. Good. Is there anything else people wanted to raise about the work plan? No? Okay, there's a couple of things that have come onto the Cabinet Forward plan recently, which I just wanted to suggest we do put forward. The LTP4, that does sit with us. It was agreed that that would sit with us. So I think that needs to go into our November agenda. It's on the forward plan as well. Okay, well we'll talk about that then. It's on the forward plan as being us, but we will discuss that further. Okay, and then the other one was that there's the BDC Winter Gardens development plan has just been added, and I think that the board would probably the board would probably like to see that, so that will need to go on to our December agenda. If everyone agrees, yeah, I'm seeing nods. Good, okay. And I'll look again at the LTP4. It does on the forward plan at the moment. It says it's us, but I agree. I thought transport was them. Yeah. And then I thought, oh, goody. Sorry. No, it's fine. Okay.
I think it's just an error when it was registered.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, I think that's everything. So thank you all very much for your time, and I will close the meeting there. Good evening.
Thank you, Kate.